Now, here's another problem that people have. See, when I was younger, people didn't get any of this with me. And it was to where all the different strategies were used properly. Because I had to go through different things to find out the reasons, which I already knew. They didn't care about the complexities that went with it. Instead, they wanted all these people to label me, inappropriately label me with something that was unfitting, unprofessional, or should I say non-professional for that matter. And I found the different ones that don't work. Like this right here, it really doesn't 100% work. As you can see here, there's not a lot of content. This is how I am more into words. And the other way is more complexing because the more words, the harder it is for me to find out how to put the words into the right way to construct the words in a better manner. So this is easier for me. Now, unless it's something I'm not familiar with, then it's not easier. So it has to be in a certain way. Like, this is a little biblical scripture here. And as you can see here, it is from a different scriptures. I think it is 2 Timothy. Yep. Then it goes into Titus. But it's the 10th verse. It says, "But you have followed my teachings, conduct, purpose, faith, patience, love, and endurance, along with the persecutions and sufferings that came to me." And then there are words I can't pronounce. See, that's the issue my parents had with me, is they don't understand how my brain processed everything. So I couldn't do it in a way that made sense to them. So, and my brain isn't like theirs by any and all means. So it develops in a whole different way, which is the dyspraxia levels, in which I already am aware. Yeah, I'm not an occupational therapist, but there's so many they didn't go to because they didn't understand these things from my point of view. So it was like, even if I read even the Bible, they didn't understand how I didn't know it. So, and like with listening, I might they confuse it with autism, which is ridiculous. And so, because they don't know that with dyspraxia, it's more complex than a little bit of autism. Autism is, they describe it completely different. Like, myself thinks I'm autistic. No, I'm not autistic. I can do something, but it's a matter of the complexity level of completion, especially since the instructions are not followed through in a certain way, which means the steps are not lessened down. So, like in Bible reading, if the steps are a certain way, I can get the scripture easier. Same thing with reading. If it's not, I'm going to be just skipping all over the place. I'm not going to go in a particular order. And that's another thing with dyspraxia, because it's a part of sensory processing. So, like when I sing, I might sing a cappella, which I'm not used to, but because without the certain sounds in the background, it might be more complexity. Now, if there's too many sounds in the background, I might not go there with any of it. I might just completely shut down and be like I'm at non-responsive. But yeah, let's just say or unresponsive. Yeah, and that's the difference too, because the less I can get rid of that noise complications, the more I can focus on the content or contents, depending on what's going on. Like if there's a dry erase board it might take some doing to get me to use that. And yeah, and that's the same, that's the other thing. In a family like mine, we don't really appreciate each other's efforts. So we might, yeah, and I try to do that as much as I can. And my ex is like, well, I'm not at your level. I'm not taught to just, yeah, do certain things at different levels. And yeah, where it's narrowing down my speech or my communication or whatever, because my mom used to flare up at me. Like, I had to have her brain, I had to know what she knew. Otherwise, to me, or to her, I really wasn't of any use. And I was like, well, that's not good for a mother to treat her kid that way, especially when they don't learn at the same pace and yet, or the same understanding. So she wasn't as empathetic as I was with the content or what she was teaching me. Like, she taught me gross pay and net pay, or gross pay and net pay. And I was like, because when I had my first job, I was like, okay, so that's what she meant by that. And yeah, she was in a higher math than I was. And she bullied me a lot because my brain wasn't like hers, or it wasn't constructing like hers. Same thing with my dad and my stepmom and my other stepdad. If their brain wasn't like yours, they don't accept you very good, which is an issue I have with acceptance. You have to work with my brain. You can't assume your brain's going to be adjusted accordingly. No, it doesn't work that way. That's why I get mad with my ex, because he doesn't understand I'm not at his level. I hated being at certain levels where I felt like I was stuck. And I read a book that was about unsticking, or getting yourself unstuck. Because of that, it's like a trap. And yeah, and they have a thing called memory trap, which is basically helping the brain recall certain things and understanding what isn't recalled that would affect one's ability to learn, like mine, in my case, where people want me to forget, and I don't do that. My brain won't forget. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. So what it does is it reconstructs the whole entire scene. So it makes it everything that wasn't observed, it goes to the details of why it wasn't observed, how it wasn't observed, and it's taken a little bit more into an advancement level, which, like in some books that I'm reading, or started to, like becoming a master student. There's one where you're supposed to follow with the assignment. It says to write about like a school thing, maybe it's something you've been through in school, like you had issues trying to bring something that was affecting your schooling right then and there, and out where the teacher would be more aware of things but not allow bullying to be present, which most teachers don't do. So I noticed some do that, but it's to a bare minimum. It's not to where the other classmates will stop bullying or lessen the bullying. And I've got bullied by several people they're like all these popular, and I'm like, bullying should not be a popular thing. And like this one boy, he was like, oh, girls don't play basketball. Yeah, they do. And this is and that's the other thing, women do play sports. There's women in soccer, there's women in gymnastics, there's women in ice skating, and there's women in tennis. So every sport that I can think of, there's women, even in hockey. So the immaturity level of their not understanding this, it makes it more complexing for someone like me. And yeah, and I don't do everything with the sport because I'm still getting more acquainted to learning the skills rather than having somebody insult me just because it's not at their understanding. And yeah, and that's another thing too with the speech is like some words are very difficult to go down to different levels of the word. So like skills, I take it a whole different way with the word. Like all the other ones, like semi-skilled, which means half skilled. Yeah, say, hemi, I think it's hemi? Like hemisphere? That's, half is the hemi. H-I, or H, excuse me, H-E-M-I. Yeah, and that's the other thing with the spelling, is that with dyspraxia, the spelling differs as if we're going to go there or not. So we might say it in full and forget to spell it out. Sometimes we might spell it out, and then the other way, forget to write it. And that's another process. And it also goes with dysgraphia, and it also goes with, like, if the math is in there, like if we're working with numbers, that's the other part, because there is another, I got the book somewhere, or somewhere in my movies or videos, where it's actual math impairment that I've had all my life. Yeah, where I slowed the math process down, which I didn't do it intentionally. I was doing it because so much was not being focused on because of the focus shifts, as you noticed. And I also had RAD, reactive attachment disorder, which I found in different medical books when I was going through a self-help group. Or to a self-help group, I saw that, and I'm like, yeah, I have over 5 of the symptoms, and it should have been diagnosed, but wasn't. Let's just say that's how inexperienced medical personnel are getting these days, because they don't realize how these symptoms, especially with the levels of complexity of each one, are actually affect the person. So like with me, with dyspraxia, I have over 15 of the symptoms, which is very exhaustive because there's 27 that they identify. And yeah, and there's different resources that identify all 27. And it's how everything is constructed. Now, the dyspraxia was once known as DCD, developmental coordination disorder, which means it's permanent. And so no matter how we try to fix it, we're going to have it for life. And yeah, it's more common with boys than girls. And that's another one of those awkward conditions that it's more leaning on them instead of us. And I'm now in another course again. So I'm doing a little bit higher than I normally do. Actually, I wanted to go that high anyway because of certain things people dismiss in me that they don't care about. Like with my ex, he doesn't care about this kind of medical terminology. And I noticed that certain people don't have a care for this. So yeah, like some doctors, they'll think they're right off the bat, and they won't even take a look and investigate further to see if they are wrong, which is not what one of my jobs required me to do. If we're wrong, we say so. We just don't go and do something and not try to correct that error if we did make an error. And yeah, and that's to say a lot of people aren't like that at all. They just assume they're error-free, and they're not. Yeah, that's to say that's like my family. They weren't error-free with teaching me things. They weren't. That's where the fruits of the Spirit, as people read that, Galatians 5:22 through 23, that talks about the fruits of the Spirit. And they weren't patient with me. And that's to say, with dyspraxia, you've got to be patient. You gotta learn what that word means. So, to us, if you rush us with like over 12 words to us, that's going to put us on overload instant. So if we stop at one word, that means we want to work with it more, not less. Because if we don't work with it more, then we're going to be stuck in that area, which we don't want to be. So it's the less, we'll have less awareness of when certain things come and go. But that's not 100% true, because we already know of the awareness levels. We just need to find out how to get more access to help them understand, okay, this is where we need to work on, not that, this. And that will change the whole way we look at the word or words, depending on how well we know them already. It's like adding them in a sentence. Since there's over 4, we'll have to figure out which one suits us. Not just one that, somebody can write it and then it will relate to us. Not exactly. That's a throw off for dyspraxia. People who have dyspraxic symptoms. Especially with me, because with me, you could take, like, again, this word, we could take the thoughts and look at it as, okay, a thought is just a thought. No, it's not. A thought comes from different experiences, whether they're negative experience or positive experiences. And some experiences were not, as one entitles it, they were called unprocessed or unexamined beliefs, which means they weren't looked at observantly enough to know what details are missing and the different circumstances that went with it, like what details were missing and what weren't. This is where we get totally inaccurate in medical terminology. It's where we dismiss so much of the facts, like people acting out. It's not because they're intentionally doing it. A lot of times we see that, and no, they're unintentionally doing that. And most of the time when it is intentional, it's because you're not hearing them to where they are, it's not 100% mutual. So, and that's where some relationships are harder, when there's no mutual connection. And that's to say, especially with teachers and their students, it's not based off, it shouldn't be based off the teacher's needs, it should be based off the student. Because that's what teaching is about. It's the student, not the teacher. And we got so much in reverse. It's crazy how much we have in reverse, like emotional regulation and deprivation. The deprivation is one of the ones where it kind of goes hand in hand, but it's very intensifying. Like acronyms are intensifying, like the ones I'm learning or have learned before. Yeah, I knew about them, but and actually had been using them, but let's just say the introductory to them was not introduced to me the way I had learned it. So yeah, they have a picture of it, and it shows what all of the picture, or what the word means. I was like, okay, that's more better to me, because then I could stop at the word and think about the situations in the word. Yeah, because in ACEPS, that's an acronym, there is one in particular that I do regularly, more than one actually, and I do about maybe 4, at least 4 or more of those. But yeah, it depends on how I want to do them. So like with the emotions, I like writing my emotions down. I don't like people who say, well, yeah, I shouldn't feel that. No, it's not up to you to decide to feel it. It's up to me. And how I'm changing it is with the other conditions, like the contributing. Yeah, that's the other thing too. Max is like, well, there is no difference. Yes, there is. Contributing means what's adding to it. So contributing is where you it's more of like donating, where you decide that you want to help in a certain way. So like I used to do certain things with different organizations, like sending them money so that they can help other people. Because yeah, it's a common when you're dealing with organizations. Remember, they contribute in different ways. So the mainly most are volunteer. So the people don't really get paid in a way, but they do in other ways, which doesn't make sense to my family. Oh, you shouldn't be doing anything that doesn't pay. Trust me, we all do a lot that doesn't pay enough, and that's why it's really hard for some people to go long last. Whoop. But yeah, that's the other problem with the exhaustiveness of talking is I get pretty long videos sometimes.